right, welcome to Mother's Day edition of the Illuminati podcast, proudly presented by Home Field Apparel. Guys, some late breaking news on this wonderful Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. Happy Mother's Day to my beautiful wife Samantha, who has graciously been okay with USF once again hijacking a holiday. Not only is it her birthday, every single year gets tied up with the football game. And now Mother's Day. So God bless her. Wish your wife a happy Mother's Day, Seth, and your mother, Steeg, and your wife, Seth, and everybody in between. But man, what a time! What a time! Let's jump right into it. Baylor quarterback Gerry, guys, Gerry. It's Gerry,
like the snail.
Gerry Bohanon has decided to hashtag come to USF. Let's go.
A bit of a shocker, right? Like Steeg and I were talking about it earlier in the week, and we were both like, why even talk about it? It's probably got a 15% chance of happening. Like, let's not get everyone riled up. Let's wait and see what happens. And then it happened. So I was a bit shocked, actually. I didn't think it was going to happen because in my mind, he's going somewhere to start. Like, he would start at Missouri. Certainly seems like he would, right? That's kind of what you're reading and seeing. They've tried to get two other transfer portal quarterbacks, and they only have two scholarship quarterbacks that are young. So he probably starts at Missouri. So he's not coming here to be second, I don't think.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so either.
So,
just going to make that fun.
Yeah. And we'll get into, I get like there's a lot of USF fans scorned by the last 7 transfer quarterbacks that have come in to USF. So I completely get it. We'll talk about that. We'll discuss maybe why this is a little bit different, but Seth, to your point, man, we went into in our Slack channel, we're like, should we pod about this? And it was kind of more of a let's wait and see what happens. Let's not rile the masses. We tend to do that sometimes. So we laid off a little bit and just kind of let it out. When the news kind of broke that he was coming for a visit, what was that, Monday or Tuesday of this past week? It was, my initial gut reaction is, okay, this coaching staff thinks that they have enough talent at other positions that they can compete for 6 wins, 7 wins this season. So am I totally off base that maybe this is why they go out and bring in a guy who started for a 12-win team, who won the Big 12, who won the Sugar Bowl, albeit he wasn't great in the Sugar Bowl, but he was coming off of a hamstring injury that kept him out, I think, the final 2 games of the regular season, or at least the Big 12 championship game. So, I mean, does this change your thought process heading into, fall camp's always the thing. There's still going to be, I'd assume there's still going to be some attrition, but does this change your kind of, raise the floor or ceiling maybe for your expectations going into 2022? Seth, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think you said exactly what I thought initially. Is this definitely raises your floor. I think you got a guy that's a proven winner. Now, he's not. I don't think he's going to come in and light the world on fire necessarily. Maybe he will. He's really talented. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, the 10th dual threat quarterback in the country, number 1 player in the state of Arkansas his senior year. So he was a pretty big time recruit. I saw in the transfer portal rankings, he was an 89, which is just off the 4-star, ahead of guys like Bo Nix and a couple other bigger names that transferred out this year. So he was pretty well thought of by people around the country. And he won a lot of games. And you saw last year, there were some winnable games where just to play here or there, maybe there's some issues that, some freshman mistakes. If you clean those up with an upperclassman, maybe you win a couple more games last year. So it definitely strikes me as a kind of a let's win now. Let's not wait. If this guy can come in and add something, then let's do it. And then, Trickett got to see it up close and personal because Bohanon's best game last year was against West Virginia. He torched them for like 330 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, and then another rushing touchdown. So he killed them. So he got to see it live in living color. So, I think he's probably got – and then he got to see the quarterbacks this spring. So he's probably got a pretty good idea about, what he can bring to this team and if he can make them better. At worst, you're bringing in a great competition. And if, Timmy beats him out, then you're like, he's really ready to go. And if he's not ready, well, then you got a guy that's proven he can win games at a high level.
Right. And Steeg, kind of to piggyback off that, Gerry has 2 years of eligibility left, right? So this isn't just a, kind of a win now kind of mentality. This is, you can be good for 2 years potentially if Gerry sticks it out, that extra COVID year. Who knows what's going to happen, in 2023 if he, is good enough to go to the draft or, heads to the portal again. It doesn't, in the world of NIL and college football today, we have no idea what these kind of transfers are going to be. But what's, the future of this quarterback room's, it's maybe a little bit murkier, but at the same time, it's pretty clear you don't bring a guy like this in to ride the pine. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, it's pretty fair. I mean, the key thing of this all was that USF and Jeff Scott and Travis Trickett, excuse me, they weren't necessarily quarterback hunting. But when the opportunity presented themselves, that's not something you can really turn down. And this isn't an indictment, or this isn't anything negative towards Travis Marsh, Byron Brown, or Timmy McClain here. This is just, you have an opportunity to get a guy who can come in and really be that missing piece that you needed on the offense. I think Gerry brings a really different but dynamic style of quarterbacking. And even then, yes, he has, and I put it in air quotes, it's 2 years is how it's being considered right now, because you do have that extra year of eligibility. I don't think he would stay unless, there was more to this than I've heard. I think he's probably a 1 year guy that's just here to put up big numbers, believe in Jeff Scott, believe in Trickett, and hopefully start the 12 games, 13 games, however games he plays this year, and then rides it into hopefully going into the NFL or something along those lines. I'm not getting any indication that if he wants to come for 2 years, I'm sure he's welcome to, but I'm getting the indication it's probably a one and done kind of situation here. He's been in school for almost 5 years now. He, not to say he's getting bored of it, but there's only so many master's programs that you can get through between Baylor and USF here. But I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, this doesn't really change much of the QB room dynamic. This is just kind of almost every single guy basically can redshirt now. Travis Marsh aside, who's already used his redshirt, Timmy can redshirt, Byron Brown can redshirt, Gunnar Smith can redshirt. And they also have the remaining years of eligibility left. So really the only person that might be in the loser seat here is Marsh, potentially. But even then, they all 5 of them are hungry competitors. No one's going to just lose this starting quarterback competition and dip out, August 1st here or anything like that. I don't suppose that's on the table. It is a crowded QB room now. Typically, you probably want 5 chairs at the table. That 5th chair being your walk-on quarterback that's scout team and has a good time and has fun. So I think it's pretty much a crowded QB room. Someone's going to leave. That's just the nature of the business right now. That's just the nature of college football. I wouldn't get too personal or upset towards any of that. That's just the nature of how it is. And Jeff's a pretty stand-up guy. I don't think anyone's going to transfer for August at this point, though.
To me, one thing this said to me, I thought when the news initially came out, to me, I thought this said that they felt pretty good about Byron Brown. Because you're not necessarily scared. If you're not necessarily scared about losing one of those older guys, and older, like a year older, Marsh or McClain, if you're not necessarily scared about one of those guys leaving, then you probably feel pretty good about where Byron Brown's going to be in 2 years, because he came in, had a pretty good spring by all reports. So that's another piece to consider, I think. But it's definitely a kind of a win now move. You're really putting all your chips into the middle of the table here, because if it goes bad, it kind of could blow up big time. There's not it's hard. This one's hard to come back from if it goes wrong for you. But
yeah, you go 3-9
the program if it doesn't work straight on.
Yeah, like you go 3-9. Gary has a terrible year. You lose Timmy, and then you're back to square one. And like at this point, you kind of throw your hands up in the air and just you kind of have to roll the dice. Like USF hasn't, Gary put up 2,200 yards, 18 passing touchdowns to 7 interceptions in 2021, and then he added 326 yards on the ground and another 9 rushing touchdowns. USF hasn't had that capability since 2017, Quentin Flowers' senior year. Like, this is a difference maker, and this guy is big. He's what, like 6'3", 225, if I'm not mistaken. Like, he's a stocky guy, 6'3", 221. You pair him with Jaron Mangum and Brian Battie and Kelly Joyner. I mean, it's a pretty formidable backfield already. And then you're adding there's the skill position is really we've talked about multiple times over the last couple of months. The skill position's there. Like, there is talent at the skill position. It was they figure out the quarterback room, and then once they figure that out, is the defense going to be? We're not asking for 85 Bears here. Like, below average, you can win 6 games.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of the key. Is it worth like the risk reward? The risk is it blows up and you're kind of starting back over. Reward could possibly be now you're bowling, which I think is would be a big step forward that's needed to kind of not just for the program, but internally, but externally as well, with the fan base and kind of quelling some of the dissent in parts of the fan base, just because the results have not been there. Yeah, I think you can take the results in context and try to kind of provide context to the results, but at a certain point, results have to come. So if this is the year if this makes them make that jump to a bowl game, then I think it's probably worth taking that risk if they think this can kind of push them over the top there.
It was Chris Torello tweeted it, and I will reiterate this for the end of time. I talked to a USF source last week, and tonight one of his comments rings true. Quote, "The coaches are tired of talking about changing the culture. It's changed. They want to fucking win." And if that doesn't, I mentioned in the article, like, between Gary's comments, between this unnamed USF coaching staff, and I'm very positive I know who it is, this is win now. This is them putting literally all of the chips on the table. If it doesn't work now,
right?
Yeah,
and it's not so much like, okay, if they don't make this move and they win 4 games or something like that, like, Jeff Scott's not on the hot seat. He's not getting fired in the offseason. But they know, like, okay, we can only go off of hope and prayer for so long. Like, we need to start seeing some results. Jeff Scott said it in the post-game presser after the Central Florida game. Is like, I know this isn't a lifetime deal. I know we need to start winning. And I think in this offseason, he's done the right thing so far to at least give USF a shot to put a winning product on the field. And frankly, it started with firing Glenn Spencer.
Yeah, I think the good first step.
It really was
in the right direction.
It really was, because then you see, okay, so with a competent defensive coordinator, the defense played very well in the final game of the season. You're thinking, well, did they have enough? Was there some talent on the defensive side of the ball? And you kind of go position by position, like, oh yeah, well, yeah, kind of. Will Jones comes back healthy. Matt Hill's not thrown into the fire after converting to DB, And then you bring in a couple of transfers, DJ Gordon and Jalen Schuler, who look like absolute stars in the making, in the linebacker room. You fill out the defensive line a little bit with some transfers that can make splash plays. The pieces are starting to be there. And, I kind of go back to that gut reaction, like, they think they can win 6 games this year if they hit on quarterback. That was just my gut feeling to it. And, it could be Timmy, but, his decision-making skills weren't great. And we've talked about this at nauseam, so that didn't really improve as the season went on. Is it coaching or is it just him? That's up for debate.
And threw into like triple coverage in the spring game for an interception.
But besides that,
no, I think Daniel asked earlier, like any kind of coaching. And I haven't watched a ton. We're going to do that later in the week. I think we're going to do a film room with some of his games from last year. But I've watched a little bit. What I saw and just kind of the little bit I watched is, you mentioned it, kind of a big, strong dude, a good runner. I thought he was a pretty good decision maker too, and just kind of the quick few bits I watched, kind of in command of the offense. And it was the first year in that offense, so I think that makes you feel pretty good that he can come in to a new place and pick it up pretty quickly. So probably a pretty bright guy, really well thought of in the locker room too, well thought of by his coaches. The fact that kind of Aranda would give him the courtesy of kind of saying, hey, we're going to go with the other guy before that May 1st deadline might tell you kind of what he thinks about him a little bit too, and maybe a little bit about Aranda as well. But I think he's got a lot of physical tools. I don't think he's the most polished passer, but I think he's a pretty good decision maker. He's won a lot of games, and at some point that matters, right? And then I think Daniel also mentioned, and we were going to kind of talk about, he played BYU last year, so he's kind of he also played BYU, so he kind of has an idea what they do too. So game 1, he's seen it already as well as the team did last year, and he does throw the ball. I did see he hit a couple shots down the field off play action. That was kind of what they did. So he's got a pretty good arm. He hit some of those shots last year that USF missed. And I think Daniel just mentioned that. Yeah, PFF said he was a pretty good – and his yards per attempt were, I think, 8+, which is not bad, better than what was on the roster. And then I think an interesting way to contextualize this a little bit is well, Joe, on the Fortin side,
we'll get to that in a minute. Go ahead and finish your thought. We'll because it's not just Fortin, there's a whole list of guys we'll have to talk about.
So Bohanon in the transfer portal and kind of his 1 year starting, he was rated above Michael Penix. If Michael Penix would have transferred here, people would have been going nuts, right? People would have been like, we're going to be awesome. We're going to be unbelievable. So he was rated above Penix in the transfer portal rankings by 24/7. Now, take it or leave it, but his stats last year were better than Penix's the last 2 years. So I think he's a quality guy. And at worst, what's interesting, as of right now, it doesn't cost you any money to get anybody. So if he comes in is not the guy, well, guess what? You still got the guys you were going to have anyway. So I think it's definitely worth the risk here.
Yep. All right, so let's kind of get into the
I think
nuts and bolts.
Real quick, Gary comes in. I mean, he won a lot of games last year in some big tough environments. So I think he very well might be that guy that can come in. He won 12 games last year in the Big 12, which had some pretty good defenses in it. Now, they didn't always win because of him, but they beat some pretty good teams, and he played pretty well. So
he led actually 2 really clutch drives against Oklahoma last year to upset them.
Yeah, so I don't think that stage and that kind of environment is going to be an issue for him. So
yeah,
I think he could definitely be that kind of guy.
Yeah. So let's discuss the elephant in the room, right? It's USF fans, rightly so, have been scorned by touted Power 5 or other QB transfers since Quentin Flowers left. Okay. Spring of 17, right? No, spring of 18. They bring in Blake Barnett, who had transferred twice previously. And what in turn happened is you pushed out Brett Keane and Chris Oladokun, who is now a Pittsburgh Steeler after getting drafted in the 7th round of the 2022 NFL Draft. What then resulted has been 4 years in the wilderness without stability at the quarterback position. Blake Barnett showed flashes, could never really get over the hump when teams had film on him because he started one game at Alabama, never saw the field at Arizona State before transferring, and then came in as a starter. They got film on him, and who was kind of figured out, got hurt, and that was kind of the end. 2019, same deal. Injuries, just a bad team overall. 2020 comes in. Jeff Scott brings in Noah Johnson and Cade Forden. Noah started a lot of football games for Alcorn State and was very good. He was the player of the year, but he also missed time, and his backup became the player of the year in the same conference. Cade is apparently made of glass, is really what it came down to. I think since his junior year of high school, if I'm not mistaken, he had always been hurt at some point during his collegiate career. And it happened again. And then you trot out Jaron Williams last year. You bring in this Miami guy, started a few games, showed some flashes. That Louisville game stands out to me, but just never could catch up after being out for an entire calendar year, not taking a hit, just never caught up. So I get why USF fans would be hesitant to roll the dice once again, especially, the context of Gerry even being in the transfer portal is he got beat out by someone younger. I mean, that's the only reason why he's even at USF. He got beat out by someone who lit it up in the Big 12 championship game after he got hurt. And then you kind of come back and I think he went 7 for 17 in the bowl game, in the Sugar Bowl. They won, but he didn't have his best game. And the game before he got hurt, didn't really have a great game either. So there was a reason why he was in the portal. And maybe Steeg's rubbing off on me, but the situation just feels completely different. And like, this is a very good thing for USF, for Gerry, that it's just not quite as the same as all of the other situations. I could be dead wrong. Seth, am I in the ballpark, or am I just completely off the reservation on this one?
I mean, I think you're getting a guy that's played games. I think that's the biggest difference. Played at a high level, not necessarily his play every time, but he played, Power 5 football, won a lot of games. I think winning definitely, as silly as it sounds, I think winning matters at quarterback. Like, it's not the be all end all. There are times you can get dragged to wins when you're not very good. But in tight games, you have to make plays to win. We've seen that the last couple of years watching USF. They get in tight games, they don't make the plays to win. Like, it comes down to, can you make the play to win the game or not? And last year, he was able to do that in a Power 5 conference that had some pretty good defenses against some pretty good teams. So I think there you got to feel pretty good about that. You look at the Cade Forden situation. I know I think it was Joe asked about that earlier. He was more referencing, like, does it turn into like the carousel of, okay, well, not him, now him. Okay, well, it's not really him. It's going to be this guy.
That's going to have to be a proven, like, I think we just kind of go in assuming that until Jeff Scott tells us otherwise or proves otherwise, right? I mean, you go into this whole rigmarole about Cade Fortin being QB1.
I think that was going to be
a quarter and a half.
I think that was going to be the situation regardless if somebody transferred in or not.
Right.
It certainly seemed coming out of the spring game. There are some people, there's a quarterback controversy now. So I just, with regards to that, I think you may have gotten that. And it really comes down to they don't have that guy that just kind of stepped up and totally taken over. My guess would be that this also helps balance the classes a little bit in terms of where you have your players, because they would have 3 or 4 quarterbacks on the roster that are redshirt freshmen or younger, right? So this kind of gets an older guy in the room to help you balance out your classes a little bit. And then I think he just kind of provides something you haven't had, and my guess would be that if you put Jeff Scott on truth serum, if Cade Fortin was ready to go last year, and I don't think he would think that Timmy was ready to play last year if he had a better option. He kind of had to play him as a true freshman. Was he ready? I don't think he was totally ready for that, and that showed kind of his inconsistency. So, is this a demotion? Yeah, maybe. Or is it really a reflection on the poor recruiting that happened prior, that you didn't have somebody on the team that was better than a freshman coming in? It may be just that. So this isn't necessarily like Timmy McClain's not doing well, we need to get somebody to come in over him. It's really that Timmy McClain wasn't ready last year. We had to put him in a really tough situation. He performed pretty well considering, but he's still maybe not ready to take that next step. And if you have an option of a guy that's ready to do it, then you got to take it. Now, none of this is to say it's going to work out. I don't think this is like a total home run. The guy, as you said, the guy's transferring for a reason. He lost a job. He's not the most polished passer, even though he completed over 60% of his passes, which is good to see. And in that offense, they take shots too. So it's not like all dinks and dunks down the field. So that percentage is probably pretty good to see. But this is not a home run totally. But I think it's, in terms of on-field performance, not a total home run. But in terms of making your team better, I think it's a definite home run. There's no risk from that side. The risk is how this affects the other guys in the locker room.
Yeah, and I think that Daniel kind of, if Bryce Young got beat out, it doesn't mean he's a bad option, and you see it across the country, right?
I heard some people bring up Jalen Hurts.
Right. Yeah, he was going to be a name I mentioned. Joe Burrow. Again, we're not saying that Gary is these guys, but there are other reasons to transfer out. Even if you do get beat out, doesn't mean you're a bad option, as Daniel pointed out. At this point, why not? I think they're still kind of in the running for that JUCO offensive tackle as well. I think they're looking to get better right now, because you guys, some of us here saw the spring game, and there's talent there. There's talent on this football team. So why not take the shot? And instead of bumping up to 4 wins, now you're 4 up, being at 3 or 4 wins. Now it's maybe 5 or 6 wins, and maybe you can steal a game that you didn't really think you'd be in. I'm not saying they can beat Florida, but it's pretty early in the season. Billy Napier's got to figure out what he's got over there. Anthony Richardson may get another speeding ticket for going, 145 miles an hour in a school zone and passing a bus. Who knows? But why not? Why not take a shot?
Exactly. The thing is, we talked about it ad nauseum on Twitter all the time, and everyone says it every single time. Jeff Scott needs to win this year. Jeff Scott needs to win this year. And then everyone's pounding the table. Win games this year. Win games this year. And then he makes a move to potentially win games this year. And people are now questioning why he's making
don't do it like that.
Yeah, not like
no. No, don't do that. You're jeopardizing Timmy McClain's development. Timmy, in all things, Timmy showed flashes of absolute brilliance last year. But he also looked like an idiot last year at times too. And in the most frank way possible, if Gerry Bohanon is playing in that UCF game on Black Friday he scores on that last play, and Timmy took a sack and
Or he
had us
throws
lose
the
the game.
ball out of the 15
Right.
yards up out of the back of the end zone.
Right, and this is not an indictment upon like Timmy McClain and his playmaking abilities. Like, he can make plays. There's just no harm in basically letting him stew for a year, redshirting him, and then letting him take over after that if Gerry leaves at that point. But at the end of the day, I mean, the staff putting more chips on the table, for me at least, I think you'll probably see this in the next couple of weeks as well. They're not, I said it before as well, they're not done with the portal. They're never going to be done with the portal. This is going to be a consistent thing for Jeff Scott. Nate mentioned the offensive tackle that they've been going after in the JUCO ranks. There's a few defensive tackles that they're looking at as well. And those were the three things that I thought that the staff needed to do in order to kind of put themselves in a really good position going into next year. Was they needed to bring in a veteran quarterback with starting experience at a Division I school. That was the key thing for me. And I annoyed Seth at it more times than I think he's willing to admit it. But that was like one thing I was like, they need to bring in a guy who has played a Division I football game as well, because right now you have really no one behind Timmy and Trey Marsh. So needed to get a guy with experience. You need to bring in another offensive tackle because it's paper thin there. And then you need to bring in at least one more defensive tackle, preferably that has, at least a little bit of playing time under their belt. But, at the end of the day, this is what the staff needed to do. We all know it. It sucks, yes, because we want Timmy to be successful and we want him to flourish into a butterfly, but not yet. Everyone was like, Quentin Flowers, he's the next Quentin Flowers after that BYU game. And then I was like, guys, he's a freshman. He's played his first game on the road. Like, he'll be good, but he's gotta stew for a little bit.
I think that's well said there, Steeg. And you also, another thing you mentioned a lot to me numerous times is how much you like Baylor's offense. So this is kind of a double dip for you.
Oh God, I before move have been made by a offensive coordinator going to Ole Miss, I was gushing about Baylor's offense and how efficiently it was run and how well it would look with the USF personnel that we brought in. And then we just steal the quarterback who can probably bring a few plays from that playbook as well. Baylor's offense last year was quite to watch, really efficient. Utilize their running backs well, which is probably the biggest strength biggest consistent strength on the USF roster right now. Is you have a really deep running back room with about 4 or 5 guys that can pop it off at any time. Baylor was basically the same thing. They had like 8 running backs last year that touched the ball. And it's some pretty good deep ball receivers as well. There's a lot of similarities between Baylor's offense last year and what USF is probably going to be rolling out. And then we just took their quarterback from last year. So if Gerry Bohanon leads us to a 12-2 season, by God, that's all I can ask for at this point.
Yeah, and they had some really good run after catch guys. I think USF's got really good run after catch guys that you just need to get the ball to. So if you got a guy that can get them the ball, really at this stage of where the program's at, every move that raises the talent level is a good move, right? So this move raises the team talent level. So I don't think you can say it's a bad move. Now, if there's a mass exodus at the position, and then you got Bohanon and then 2 freshmen, and then Bohanon gets hurt, well, then maybe you messed up. But you can't you got to think of, okay, what's on the positive end? How can this positively affect us? Because bad stuff can happen all the time.
But to that, to the QB room and experience, I think Trey Marsh has started and finished exactly one game in his career. The ECU game from last year. He's been here 3 years now. So he started and played in a bunch of games, which are fine, but he has not started and completed that many games. So the experience factor, same thing with Timmy. Timmy had 9-10 starts last year. So plenty, but he was very, very, very inconsistent, as we've talked about. So it's not like, okay, if one of them leaves, you're losing so much experience. You're losing a 25 game starter or something like that. You're losing a guy who's in Trey Marsh, who may have taken maybe 150 to maybe 200 snaps in live game action over the course of his 3 years, who has already had one foot out the door and was brought back. And now I thought his post, Seth, you and I really haven't really talked about it, but his post game comments after the spring game were a little interesting. Was I just reading a little much into it?
And talking about Marsh, or
yeah.
I took this just made me flash back to his comment about how he's made a commitment to stay in USF. I was like, I want to rethink that one. I don't know. Like that's a tough spot to be put in right there, because you asked him about coming out of the portal. So yeah, that's tough. That's tough, but I think he kind of went in the portal and saw that his shooters were not quite what he thought they may be. So at a certain point, the film doesn't lie. So, and Bohanon's got some pretty good film. So.
That's also true. So, I mean, let's try to keep it a tight. We'll go deeper this week on Gary's film.
Can I just want one more thing. Can we just talk about Jeff Scott stuffing that nerd Drinkwitz into a locker and just taking this from Missouri?
I mean, Eli thought he had cracked the open the door back. He got stuffed into a locker by Arizona State of all people. And then he's like, all right, well, there's no way USF's going to do the exact same thing, except they literally did.
Yeah, he went over. He's gone over
for the entire offseason. Like, how do you do that?
That's what really leads me to believe that, it wasn't like, hey, Gary, come on down and give it the old college try. It's like, hey, man, look at these guys we've got. We need somebody that can get them the ball. You come in here, you'll start.
Right.
Because I think that's what he's being told at Missouri.
Yeah. And it's, okay, he was in Waco, Texas for like 4 years. Do you really want to go to Columbia, Missouri for the next 2 years, or do you want to go to Tampa, Florida? I think that's a pretty big selling point as well. I think, if they hit all the spots that they normally do, Sparkman and all that, I mean, that's
the funniest thing of this all was I've been snooping through the Mizzou boards, and I was also talking with a guy from 247 there about this. And they're convinced, well, not the Mizzou 247 guy. There's a contingency, like a QAnon gap of Mizzou fans that think that we had like an NIL deal secured with Gary, and that's how we got him. And I messaged the guy. I was like, we don't have an NIL collective set up. Every NIL deal that has happened at USF thus far has been the player setting it up themselves and doing it themselves. We don't have like a collective or anything like that. And he's like, oh, shit.
Wasn't there a mention of that in the ESPN article, though?
There was. The NIL stuff, Gary had mentioned when he was looking around and talking with like Pete Thamel and everything, was mentioning that like NIL was a factor for him. But I think that's like, the weather's a factor for him, like that kind of thing. Like if
there were rumors that he was being offered big money to go like be a backup at Oklahoma.
Like an Oklahoma booster offered him $50,000. That's that was like proven like that happened.
And I was talking with Colin earlier in the week. I was like, does USF have any NIL thing going on? And he was unaware of any. So
they've got like the boost thing, but nothing. I don't think anything of substance, unless someone else can chime in, in the comments to let us know that like the boost thing's really taken off and everybody's.
I've never even heard of it. What is that?
It's like boost.
Yeah, it was what came out like before, like it was like official, like the NIL stuff. But it's not quite as fleshed out as say like the the only one I can think off the top of my head is like Mission Control for like UCF or like 901 Circle with like Memphis. Like it's not like fleshed out. It doesn't have a cool name.
It's tough. It's a little bit tougher in Florida because I don't think the university can set things up. So
correct. Yeah. So an alumni or booster has to set it up, and it's complicated. Like someone was like, "Why doesn't USF do this?" And it's like they can't.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it. I mean, we'll just have to start the Daily Stampede fund. We'll just take a little bit off the top. We got to keep running.
So on the way home from work every night, I drive past the lot. There's a lottery sign on I-4, heading back toward Tampa, and like every single time I see it, like when it was up to, what was it, like $400 million, something like that, a few weeks ago, maybe even more. Like I was thinking, man, first I would have to play the lotto, and then the next step is obviously just winning the lotto. But like 100%, if I won and I gave USF any type of money, like the only stipulation that I would put on it is we break everything. We break
yes.
the daily. No one gets scoops but us. So like when we start breaking everything, just know that one of us came into some money.
There we go.
Like that's just point blank period. That's what's going to happen. It's going to be written. I will give you, if it's close, like $400 million, I'll give you $10 million right now. No one breaks a single thing unless it's through us. That's fair.
That is pretty fair. I think so. We're the most dedicated individuals when it comes to this university.
That's accurate.
So $10 million, and now Brett McMurphy can't break things because he knows someone in athletics.
That liar.
It's worth it. That's worth it.
I think it's fair. But yeah, let's wrap up. We'll go deeper. We'll have a film room session, cutting up game film and stuff of Gerry Bohanon. But big night, all around for Tampa Bay. Shout out, the Rays kind of screwed the pooch a little bit in extra innings, but they beat Seattle a bunch of times over the last 2 weeks, which has been really nice to see. The Lightning tied the series 7-3. I got a little worried when they scored the second goal, Toronto scored the second goal, but they were able to battle back.
Baseball won the series.
Baseball took 2-3 from Central Florida. That was nice. Softball just kind of keeps rolling. And then men's basketball, we'll get into it. We'll do a different podcast, but this was definitely you get a starting quarterback and you do a podcast kind of thing. Tyler Harris from Memphis will be transferring into USF, and apparently he's like an 89% free throw shooter. So he'll shoot about 45 here at South Florida. So that'll be fun to see. But let's wrap it up here. Real quick. Seth, right now, May 8th, 2022 at 10:53 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, will USF make a bowl game in 2022?
I have to say yes, right? Like you can't say no and just take all the air out of the balloon.
Yes, you can.
I'm not going to do that. Yes, they'll make one.
Robert Steeg, will USF?
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah.
What am I going to say no? I don't have money on it. Yeah, sure, yes.
Fuck yeah. I've even been so far as to say 8 wins.
Let me read. Just I don't know about that one. Let me sorry, I was reading something else. But I said, so let me read off according to 24/7. Let me read off Gerry Bohanon's offer list coming out of high school. Real quick, let's go. Baylor, Arkansas, Indiana, Memphis, Alabama, Arkansas State, Auburn, Georgia, Houston, Louisville, LSU, Mississippi State, North Carolina, Ole Miss, Tennessee.
He could win the presidential election at that point.
Yeah, he's got the delegates. So I don't know how accurate all those are, but even if it's half those, that's pretty good. So
my general rule of thumb is that if Nick Saban wants you as the quarterback, you're usually pretty good.
That's the one I said. I don't know about that one, but
yeah,
maybe. I don't know.
if Blake had a working Achilles the last 5 games of the season, I'm sure he would have been fine with us. But
there you go.
What can you do at that point?
Yeah, I hear you. So I said in the offseason I thought they could win 6 games. I'm still on board. I went on local radio and said that they could win 6 games. So I'm fully invested. They're going bowling this year.
You weren't asking us like that. We can just say whatever on here.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
That's in public radio now.
I know.
That's on the air.
That's scary. That can come back to bite you. That shit
Yeah.
stays out forever.
But-
like we could delete the podcast and this is all gone, but
hey, I feel even better now. I'll be honest.
All right. Yeah.
Oh man.
that's close.
All right, for Seth, Steeg, Nathan, thank you guys for joining us on a special Mother's Day edition of the Illuminati podcast, proudly presented by Home Field Apparel. Go check that stuff out. Exciting times headed in Tampa Bay, exciting times in Tampa, exciting times on Fowler. Let's have some fun. Enjoy the rest of your week. Go Bulls.
Go Bulls.
Bulls.